Cabinet on Monday the 3rd of July 2023. It's now 9:30. All good streaming? Yes. Super. So I'd like to welcome you all here today. I'd like to particularly welcome some of our work experience individuals who are joining us from the local school. We've come to look at the fantastic work undertaken by local government. You're all most welcome. Alicia, Harry, Louis, Victor and Jonas, and I hope you have a great 2 weeks at Breckland Council, seeing the phenomenal variety of services which we deliver for you and your friends and family, but more importantly, how important they are and that actually local government matters and districts deliver. So have a great couple of weeks with us. So we'll kick straight off with item 1, which are the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 30th of May. You can see them in pages 4 to 13 of members' agenda pack. Are colleagues happy that they're a true and accurate record? Lovely, thank you very much. We'll move on to item 2, then apologies for absence. Teresa, please.
Thank you, Chairman. We've had apologies from Councillors Hewitt and Ashby this morning. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you very much. Item 3, any urgent business? I haven't received any. Item 4, declarations of interest, please. Councillor Cowan.
Thank you, Chairman. As the Council's Director on Breckland Bridge, I will be leaving the room when we come to item 15.
Lovely, thank you. And if anybody else has any declarations of interest pertinent to any items, just make us aware when we get to that item in the agenda pack. Item 5, non-members wishing to address the meeting, you are all most welcome. Thank you very much for joining us today. Chairman's announcement. Only announcement I've got to make is in relation to the recent LGC Awards, in which Breckland District Council was a finalist. I know that members and colleagues will be aware of that because I've been harping on about it previously in my full council leaders' statements, but more importantly that we won that category for health and social support. And for a district council to not only be a finalist but to win that award goes to show the incredible partnership between this district council, the third sector and the National Health Service and our county colleagues, and that how we can pivot and target our services to do that prevention work with everybody in our community, supporting those who are most vulnerable, moving that agenda away from it not just being those upper tier councils has really been a step change for the whole of the sector to acknowledge. So I'm really grateful for all of the officers, for you as members supporting our Inspiring Communities programme over the last 4 years, and of course that trust in which our partners have placed in us in how we can work together to deliver those incredible services which are valued by so many across the district. So thank you to everyone involved with that. But of course that isn't the end. In a new council cycle, I know that Steve and Councillor Ashby are working through Inspiring Communities Mark II, and I look forward to that being presented at a future Cabinet and Council meeting over the coming months. I move on to item 7 then, which is Breckland Community Funding applications. In Councillor Ashby's absence, there isn't any, that will be picked up in the Inspiring Communities Mark II refresh for that budget allocation and the criteria selection for that. So we'll move on to item 8 then, which is the housing assistance policy, and Councillor Bowes to present, please.
Yes, I'd like to introduce the housing assistance policy. Breckland Council are required to have this policy in place to meet the requirements of the Regulatory Reform Housing Assistant England and Wales Order 2002. And this legislation specifies that local authorities may provide directly or indirectly assistance to any person for various purposes, including those of enabling them to adapt or improve living accommodation or to repair living accommodation. The policy summarises all forms of assistance provided by the Council and clarifies the approach to delivering both mandatory and discretionary grants and loans to assist vulnerable residents. It deals with mandatory assistance provided through disabled facilities grants, but also the discretionary range of support made under the order. This policy was due for renewal and has been reviewed and updated to include forget-me-not grants for people with dementia, and it also provides more clarity to discretionary grants and loans, and it also provides a non-means tested grant for residents who are seriously ill, such as with MND, and a fast-track process. The policy prioritises the delivery of DFGs over discretionary grants. In April 2023, the government announced an additional £102 million nationally over 2 years to help fund additional services that will supplement the core DFG programme by providing agile and timely home improvement support to help residents stay independent. More information on the amount of this grant will be available in the summer. This policy will put us in the best position to enable spending of the additional funding if it is not for core DFGs, and I recommend this policy for approval. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you, Claire. Good, so any questions or comments from colleagues at all? Harry?
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, I'm very pleased to see this report. Thank you, Councillor Bowes. I think it's important to recognise the tremendous work that the housing team do. I'm aware, obviously, having been to a recent introduction for new councillors and existing councillors around the challenges and opportunities they have. I noticed under 1.6 and also 1.7, we refer there to the discretionary grants, and particularly focusing on vulnerable clients. How do you envisage that's going to be reported on going forward, whether we need to look at any additions to the budget going forward, and how we're make sure we're reaching those vulnerable cases, and also it's going to be taking up, you know, a proportion of the officer time, and how you're going to balance that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Well, of course, the vulnerable cases are the priority, and I will be, and I have been approaching George Freeman MP to press for extra funding coming forward so that we can further enhance our delivery of the service. Thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you.
There we go. Bash it harder. It's just a quick question for Councillor, doesn't like me, for Councillor Bowes. Just a reminder that at the full council meeting on the 18th of May, must be like gold I'm carrying. It was just a reminder that at the council meeting on the 18th of May, Councillor Wickerson asked you for a written response to his question on a policy, and he hasn't received that yet. Could you do that, please? Thank you.
I believe he has received a response. He has, yeah. Sorry, thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Any other questions in relation to Councillor Webb, please?
Yes, I'd like to fully commend this report. It's an essential thing that we move with the times. Motor neuron disease is one of the ones that I've spoke to the charity workers who actually raise a lot of money, and they've impressed every time how important it is that we deliver the disability changes as quick as possible, because obviously of the type of disease it is. They need it like now. So I would like to fully commend this report. Thank you very much.
Lovely. Councillor Kybird.
Right. The health scrutiny could look at disabled facilities grants on a Norfolk-wide basis. That would be part of their remit. The new chairman of Norfolk Health Scrutiny is after suggestions for agenda items, so I can take that forward if you think that would help.
Thank you, Councillor Kybird. Yes, I think that would help. Thank you.
Good. If there are no further questions, can you read the recommendation, please, Councillor Bowes? Lovely, thank you. All those in favour? Thank you, that's carried. Let's move on to item 9 then, which is the strategic housing policy. Councillor Bowes to present again, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Addressing the housing crisis and homelessness is one of the key challenges facing Breckland, as well as the rest of the country. And Breckland has already taken bold and innovative steps to work towards tackling these challenges. In 21 to 22, the Council invested 1.8 million into the Elm House site in Thetford, creating new temporary accommodation capable of supporting up to 35 people at one time. In March of this year, a partnership between Breckland Council and Broadland Housing Association created 5 newly built homes in Thetford excuse me, to support former rough sleepers in the district, helping them take the next steps into long-term accommodation. In 22, the Council started a programme of targeted acquisitions to use as temporary accommodation to increase standards and availability. At full council on the 22nd of February, it was agreed that the council should accept and spend all funding available through the Local Authority Housing Fund to continue and expand this programme. This provides capital funding to local authorities to obtain and refurbish properties to provide sustainable housing for those welcomed to the area under Afghan and Ukrainian resettlement schemes. Combined, this means the council will likely own circa 26 new housing assets in the near term. As part of the programme, the council agreed to review the optimal solution for holding and managing housing assets. The council has received a strong legal and regulatory steer that it is now appropriate to become a registered provider, and officers have identified significant potential benefits in doing so. Taking this step now ensures continued regulatory compliance with significant potential wider benefits, as set out in the report. Alongside this step, given the volume of new assets now held, the Council needs to update and add to its policy and strategy documents which help govern how new properties will be managed and the basis for the fees and charging regime which will apply. The recommendations are set out in the report and agree that Breckland District Council becomes a registered provider of social housing and delegates to the Executive Director in consultation with the Executive Member for Housing and Homelessness application via the Regulator of Social Housing. 2, it agrees an updated tenancy strategy as set out in Appendix A. 3, agrees the tenancy policy as set out in Appendix B. And 4, agrees the local lettings plan as set out in Appendix C. And 5, delegates to the Executive Director in consultation with the Executive Member for Housing and Homelessness Authority to take the necessary steps to implement the above. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you, Councillor Bowes. Any questions or comments from colleagues in relation to this, please? Yeah, I've got Councillor Jeremy, then Councillor Wilkinson, please.
Good morning, Chairman. Thank you. I just wanted to comment really and say that this is really good news, and I commend the Cabinet for bringing forward this proposal. We as a council have been at a disadvantage for many years, relying on others to support us with housing. And we've seen over the last few years demand increasing, and with that costs. And I think it's really important to look at this proposal in the sense of a long-term investment. Yes, we've got to spend a fair amount of money up front, but this is a solution to a problem that's been there for a long while, and it's going to be a problem moving forward. And I think it's a really bold decision, and I'm really pleased that we as a council are looking to do this.
Goodness. Yeah, thank you, Leader. Yeah, I was going to say exactly what Councillor Jones just said. Being a registered provider will help the housing department big time. They cannot stand still. This
I can't hear you with the feedback.
is feedback again as well. Then.
I'll have a go and see if you get feedback, Chairman. It is a good policy and it has wider implications. Councillor Jeremy's quite right. We've not been in this landscape of providing housing for some time, but let's remember when we moved out of the housing provision market long before I was a councillor, it was also the right thing to do because that generated significant returns for this council, which has enabled us over the last 20 years to position us in this place in which we find ourselves, which is incredibly well managed and with significant projects that we've delivered. But right now the time is different and it's time to change, and the change is typical of the way this council has performed over the last 20 years. We move with the times, we're actually pathfinders, we lead where others follow. And one of the hidden benefits, I think, of this policy and enabling us to move into markets which hitherto we haven't been part of, means that we can do more to influence perhaps the private sector rented accommodation, leading by example, demonstrating what the right policies can deliver in terms of good quality housing. So our residents who do not live in our own properties but live in those rented by private landlords will see an increase and a betterment in their circumstances. This is a policy, a group of policies which is to be welcomed, and I commend it to this group. Thank you, Chairman.
Lovely, thank you. Any other comments at all from colleagues? Councillor Clausen.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Well, I too obviously welcome this. This is great news. And it's something, Terry, that we have looked at for years, but for years, as you well know, we weren't allowed to go there because we couldn't be a registered landlord. So now that we can, we have taken this bold move. And I think we will be looking at all options because there are other options that we will need to be looking at. But this is a real major step for us, and like everybody else, I really welcome it.
Great, thanks. So you'd like to move those recommendations, please, Councillor Bowles?
Yes, move the recommendations, Chairman.
Great. All those in favour? Thank you, that's unanimous. So move on to item 10 then, which is the corporate health and safety. Councillor Crane to present, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Breckland Council is under a legal duty under the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974 to have in place a health and safety policy. The existing health and safety policy was approved by Cabinet on the 4th of January 2021. This was when South Holland and Breckland were in a shared management arrangement and the policy was in a shared corporate template. The policy is now bespoke to Breckland Council and has been reviewed to ensure it remains up to date and in particular reflects the changes in corporate governance and how health and safety is now managed. I'm sure we all will agree that the health and safety and welfare of employees and non-employees who come onto the premises is of paramount importance. Breckland is a kind and considerate employer and also protects its communities, and we have an exemplary record, but we must not be complacent. The revised policy will enable us to continue to manage health and safety effectively and stand us in good stead for the future. I recommend that the Cabinet approve this revised health and safety policy contained at Appendix A to this report for implementation.
Lovely, thank you very much. I know this is a pretty dry subject, but something immensely important. But does anybody have any questions in relation to this item? No? Do you want to move the recommendations then, Councillor Crane?
Thank you, Chairman. Can I move the recommendation?
All those in favour? Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 11 then, which is leisure centres decarbonisation. Councillor Crane to present, please.
Thank you, Chair. The report before you seeks to release £530,000 towards the installation of decarbonisation technology at the leisure centres in Thetford and Dereham. The recommendation in the report is to proceed with the delivery of option 2. Option 1, that should read. This would see the following delivered at Thetford and Dereham: installation of destratification fans for the whole centre, building management system optimisation works, lagging improvements and optimisation of heating systems. Thetford will also see replacement of single glazed windows. This option would see an estimated overall annual cost saving of £116,171 across both sites, Thetford being £51,322 and Dereham £64,849, and a reduction in total annual carbon emissions from both centres would see an estimated overall annual carbon reduction of 175.55 tonnes across both sites, Thetford being 89.10 tonnes and Dereham 86.45. Not only will this project assist with reducing Scope 3 emissions as part of our Breckland 2035 commitment, but it also gives us the best long-term return on investment of the options presented, as well as the best immediate revenue benefit to assist in reducing the benchmark figure during the current benchmarking exercise. It goes without saying that energy costs are one of the greatest expenses associated with running leisure centres, and whilst the leisure operator has made significant inroads and demonstrated ongoing reduced usage, the reality is that the cost of energy is outstripping the reduced usage, and this is something that will continue to affect the cost of running the service if we do nothing. So the recommendations... Is it?
Yeah. We haven't assessed it.
Recommendations that Cabinet recommend to full Council agree to the release of funds of up to £530,000 from the growth reserves to enable the delivery of preferred technology mix. Option 2 of this report to ensure improvements at both PFI sites for carbon reduction and or energy cost savings. That Cabinet recommend to full Council to delegate authority to accept the terms and conditions of any future grant funding secured to Executive Member for Health and Communities in consultation with the Assistant Director of Contracts and Operations as officers continue to explore all the external funding options. That delegation is given to the Assistant Director of Contracts and Operations and the Council Solicitor in consultation with the Executive Member for Property, Projects and Procurement to carry out negotiations with Parkwood Leisure and associated companies to obtain the best benchmarking outcome for the Council. I need clarification because I've got delivery of option 2. Is that correct?
Yes.
So is option 2. I apologise. Thank you, Chair.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Councillor Crane. Any questions? Councillor Jeremy, then Councillor Kyber, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just some clarity, please, because I think there's an issue with the wording of the report, because it refers to, in recommendation 1, option 2 of the report, but there isn't an option 2. There's a section 2, and a 2.1 and a 2.2 and a 2.3. If you read option 2.2, it refers to, where's it gone? Delivery of option 2 from the report. I expected there to be like an appendices and a report outlining what the different options were and a bit more of a breakdown, really. I can't see an appendices that gives me the detail for option 2. But in yeah, okay, let me just click back forward to appendix 1. Gives you the financial breakdown, but not any rationale as to what's going to happen as part of option 2 and what the benefits are. My nervousness is because it's a lot of money, and I don't think it's clear, well, certainly not clear to me, what it is the money's being spent on and what the benefits are.
Okay, good. Does 3.1 assist any more for that? Obviously, for the reasons for recommendations in terms of the revenue for the capital investment and provides the most significant return in our carbon reduction. Obviously, there will be detail behind that, but obviously this links to our Breckland 2035 strategy around decarbonisation across all of our assets, and therefore we will have to speculate to accumulate and make sure we're meeting that mandate on our green agenda. But then on top of that, that wider provision around the cost to the PFI contract itself. But I will happily pass to officers for any specific detail in relation to that. And I'm looking around the room for somebody to assist. Rihanna, look at that. I didn't turn my head far enough, sorry.
So in terms of the 3 options that are set out in the pro forma B, option 1, 2 and 3, they're as set out in 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3. So option 2 is the one that gives the best return on investment in terms of financial revenue saving in the short term, but also the longer term saving. So in terms of the detail of what works that would include, it includes destratification fans for the whole centre, whereas option 1, you'll see under 2.1 is only for the pool hall. BMS works, which is the building management system, also further lagging and improvements to the heating systems. It will also see replacement of the single glazed windows at Thetford, which is not in option 1. Hence, the mix of technology in option 2 is seen to be the best return on investment.
Super. Does that assist at all, Councillor Jeremy?
It has, but given the size of the money we're talking about here, I don't think the report's laid out very clearly, in my view.
No, that's duly noted. No, thank you. Councillor Kybird.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, a comment. I'm surprised that bigger savings are coming from the newer building in Dereham, but that might be down to the original architects. And secondly, why haven't ground source heat pumps been looked at as an option? Thank you.
Super. Do you know the answer to that, Helen?
Chair, I know the answer to the ground source heat pumps. Thank you, Councillor Kybird, for your question. Ground source heat pumps were looked at and originally, but because the car parks would all have to be dug up, it would be very problematic. And also there is a gas line that runs under the car park at Thetford. So it was ruled out quite early on, and I'll leave our officers to answer the first question, Councillor.
So the consultants we asked to look at it, they said that ground source air heat pumps were not the most suitable solution for this asset due to its location, size, and where they'd have to place it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, in terms of the other part of the question around the greater savings being realised at Thetford, in terms of, at Dereham, Thetford has already had some variable speed drives fitted, so it basically brings Dereham up to that same standard. So there has already been investment by the leisure operator over some time in technology at both sites, but that particular one has already had the variable speed drive, so this will install them at Dereham as well.
Any follow-up, Councillor Kybird?
Only on the ground source, you can use boreholes instead of digging up car parks, and in fact those are much more efficient in the winter than ground source placed near to the ground. So I think it's worth revisiting, because you could also then use night tariffs and get a bigger cost reduction, because I would have thought the rate of cooling of a swimming pool is quite low, so if you can use cheap tariffs, you can get a better return on your money.
Stand by for a response from Rihanna.
Yeah, so in terms of the technology that was looked at as part of this project for both sites, there was a long list that was whittled down into a red, amber and green list. The technology that's come forward is those that seem to, from the expertise that we had on board, give the best return on investment in the shorter term. The look at the ground source heat pumps was indicatively over 1.4 million, and that was for the technology to be installed. Obviously, Thetford is an older building, and Dereham has less space outside in terms of being able to install that technology. So it's not necessarily dead in the water, it's just on a list that's further down in terms of that faster return on investment and the revenue savings.
Thanks. Councillor Attwell, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I have to just say that I did the original electrical installation on the Dereham Leisure Centre, so I know it very well. I just wonder whether it'd be possible to have sight of the specifications and the proposed work, whether that's something that me and Rihanna could get together with, because I'd be quite interested to.
If it's suitable and practical, I'm sure the officers will work with you and the relevant cabinet member to use your insight and knowledge around that asset itself, as long as it's appropriate to do so. Good. If there are no other points from anybody else, we've had those recommendations moved by Councillor Crane. All those in favour? Lovely. Thank you very much indeed. So move on to item 12 then, which is the performance framework review. Councillor Webb to present, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm delighted to bring forward the new performance framework for the Council. The performance framework is a key piece of the Council structure and sets out clearly how we measure, report and challenge performance as an organisation. Whilst the committee structure dictates who sees what parts of the performance, this document underpins the principles that the Council should follow in constructing and managing performance. We first brought the framework to the Cabinet 18 months ago. In that time, we have reflected on the framework and looked at other examples of best practice. What we have found is that whilst there is nothing fundamentally wrong with the current framework, it's slightly too complex in terms of how it is written, what the version of the framework sets out to do, is lay out performance in a much simpler terms and replace a lot of the technical language, which I welcome, with more straightforward wording. We have also incorporated the feedback that we were given on the original framework in this revised version. What we hoped you can see, should I say, from our new proposed framework today is a much simpler picture of how performance management functions at the Council and the steps we are taking to make sure that we can give you an accurate picture of how we are doing. My recommendation is to agree to the adoption of the revised performance framework. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you very much. Questions or comments from colleagues on this? Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I've removed any gold before I came in this morning. Just slightly bemused under looking at the Appendix 1, the performance framework. Obviously, we welcome anything that simplifies language and makes things more accessible, so that's a tick in the box from me. I was slightly bemused to read the comment in the new font script, which referred to the opportunity for the public to ask questions. I think they're referring there to the Cabinet, but also at scrutiny. And I think whilst I think the terms of Cabinet or scrutiny may allow standing orders to be, suspended, it's not routine for the public to be able to ask questions. Whether they should is a separate issue, but I just noted that in there in Appendix 1. Perhaps you could clarify that. Thank you.
There we go. Yeah, I'll have to go away and clarify that, Councillor. My understanding was that there are some opportunities to ask questions, but I will check that against the standing orders for those relevant committees and amend that as needed.
And just to clarify, that is not an amendment to the Constitution. That'd be an amendment to the text, because it's a decision of Council to amend the Constitution, not this Cabinet, as much as some people may think. Thanks, Councillor Clark. Anybody, any other questions at all? Councillor Clausen, please.
Yes, Chairman. So reading through this, am I correct in that where we say allow for nuance, improvement, analysis of trends, and in that sort of section, that we're now at last going to be using some form of artificial intelligence, for example, so that we're going to analyse the trends and so that we can then actually do stuff in advance instead of where we've been up to now, which is perfect 10-10 hindsight. So is this the tipping point where we're actually going to be able to do stuff to influence where we're going in the future?
Yeah. I do hope so, is my answer to that. That is my aspiration, to look at what we're doing with the new technology coming out, to be able to look at the future and say what's going to be happening so that we can actually improve where we are today to get where we need to be to look after our residents. So yes, that's my aspiration. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Reading through the report and how much more simple it is, I'd just like to say that it's a great improvement on the last one. Thank you very much.
Councillor Jeremy.
Thank you, Chairman. Probably a minor point. I'm at risk of being very pedantic today. I certainly don't, well, I struggle with the font that's been used for the attachment, to be honest with you. I've noticed in a couple of reports, and I've struggled to read it. But even more so, I've struggled to read the sections that are blurred out. So if you look at page 3, there's a whole load of text missing in the Appendix 1, and it's the same on the bottom of page 7 and 8. There's various sections missing. I think it's probably a sort of upload issue or a scanning issue, but there are chunks not there. I'm tempted to fill them in myself, but I just wanted to make that point because this report is going to scrutiny, so I won't comment on the content, but it would help if it was revised.
No, thanks, Councillor Jeremy. In relation to that, I'm going to defer this item because Cabinet won't be able to make a judge decision on everything which is provided because not all information's there. So we'll work with the officers to work out whether that can go straight to your committee and your commission and then on to council, whether it will need to come back to this Cabinet for ratification. So we're going to defer this item. Move on to item 13 then, which is the ICT Information Security Policy. Councillor Webb to present, please.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Today I present to you an updated IT information security policy that is central to our operations and service delivery. In an increasingly digital world, ensuring the safety of integrity and confidentiality of our data and systems is critical. The rise of cyber threats and data breaches worldwide is a sobering reminder of the risks involved. And it isn't just about financial implications. A breach can undermine our residents' trust, an asset which we all value greatly. To combat these risks, we revised our policy in alignment with ISO 27001 principles, a globally recognised standard for information security management. This demonstrates our commitment to the highest possible security standards. Our new policy isn't just about office security, it reflects the reality of how we work today. Many of us work from home, in the field or bounce between locations, so we have developed a policy that covers everyone, everywhere. It gives clear guidance on securely accessing systems from outside the office, handling data safety when remote, and using personal devices from work. As we adjust to these new work practices, we're making sure we're safe, secure, and still serving our residents to the highest possible standard. It's not just about meeting regulations, it's about fostering a culture of security awareness and acknowledging our collective responsibility in securing our digital infrastructure. I trust that you have all read the policy document and hope that you give your support to approving this policy and the delegated authority needed to ensure that we can flexibly adapt it for an ever-evolving digital world. I recommend to approve the implementation of the IT Information Security Policy and provide delegated authority for further future updates to the Assistant Director in consultation with the portfolio holder. Thank you very much.
Lovely. Thanks, Councillor Webb. Any questions or comments from colleagues in relation to the IT Information Security Policy? There are... Oh, Councillor Cowan.
Just to say, we have no choice. We all know the situation that councils in particular, public sector bodies are facing at the moment from external threats, and this is a policy which we need to embrace pretty quickly. So I would thoroughly recommend this to this Cabinet. Thank you, Chairman.
If there are no other comments, do you want to move that recommendation, Councillor Webb?
Yes, move the recommendation, please, Chairman.
Lovely, thank you. All those in favour? That's super, that's unanimous. We'll move on to item 14 then, which is the Carbon Audit 22-23, and Councillor Crane to present, please.
Thank you, Chair. In 2019, Breckland District Council was one of the first authorities in Norfolk to declare a climate emergency, committing to reduce the level of greenhouse gases within the organisation and striving to achieve net zero by 2035 and to lead and educate across the district. In 2019-20, the Council approved to carry out a baselining exercise to understand its major emission sources. Since then, data has continued to be collected and shared each financial year to monitor and track progress. I am therefore pleased to share with you today the Council's carbon emissions for the last year, 22-23. The 22-23 carbon footprint shows a positive direction of travel for the Council with reductions across many of the areas and scopes measured. The Council's emissions were 4,119.2 tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent, totalling a reduction of 463.7 tonnes in the last year. This is a 10% reduction since the previous year and a 17.5% reduction since the baseline year in 2019-20. For transparency, the Council reported the emissions for the preceding year, 21-22, as 4,556.8 tonnes, and as we learn more about measuring our emissions, we have ascertained that this figure is more accurate, at 4,582.9 tonnes, which is a difference of 26.1 tonnes. Therefore, this slightly higher figure for that year is being used in this report. The report takes you through the breakdown of how our emissions for each of the scopes have changed, and we have seen good progress in reducing those within Scope 1 and Scope 2, which are within our control. Scope 3 proves more of a challenge, and we continue to use our statutory powers and influence to educate and seek to change behaviours of those within our supply chain to be more considerate of climate change and sustainability to reduce the emissions further. Further exciting plans will come through the committee process over coming months of how we can continue to reduce our emissions. Thank you, Chair.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Councillor Crane. Any questions or comments in relation to the carbon reduction report 22-23? I've got Councillor Jeremy and then Councillor Khyber, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just 3 quick points. I think it's really important that we are clear when something is a reduction or just no longer recorded. So the report talks about the increase in home working. We may be reducing gas and electricity usage in our own council buildings, but actually that usage is transferred to individuals' homes. It's a similar situation at County Council where they reduce bills on schools, but the bills still exist, they're just transferred to the academy and away from county councils. If it's a genuine reduction because of a new way of working, great, and it's important, we acknowledge that. But if we're simply transferring it, the carbon to another place, we're no better off. So clarity on actual benefit or just a transfer. The one I'm really disappointed in is Serco. Now, I'm a member from Thetford. I drive between Thetford and Dereham reasonably often for meetings. I see Serco vans all the time now going back and forth on that road in a way that I never used to. One, that's bad for the environment from a carbon point of view, but every moment those staff are sat in the vans travelling, they're not doing the job we're employing them to do. So I think that was a real backward step in the way that the depot location and equipment and everything has moved for a variety of reasons, but we're now seeing that recorded in the report. And the last point I'd make is it's really important that we constantly review the interventions that we've made. So we've already done a few interventions. We're learning all the time as part of this process. But, for example, it makes reference to the pool covers at Thetford. Constantly reviewing the theory behind how much that will save, I think is important. The pool covers themselves don't save carbon. They save carbon if they are used. That's the important point. Just existing on the side of the pool as somebody that goes to the leisure centre, they're not used all the time. But constantly reviewing, I think, is really important because we could invest lots of money in solutions that look and sound good at the outset, but perhaps don't get the benefits we want. So I'm pleased that we are monitoring this, but reviewing the interventions is key.
Thanks. Councillor Crane?
Thank you for those comments, Councillor Jeremy, and duly noted. Thank you.
And just to pick up, I guess this is a national statistic, Claire and Michelle, that actually everybody across the whole of the country with new agile working or home work, depending on what your businesses or organisation's policy is, we're all trying to get ourselves round how we effectively manage that type of metric. So be interested if anybody's yet succeeded in that, whether that's private or public, or is it still just a bit of a watching brief?
Thank you for your question. Yeah, it absolutely is something that we'll continue to watch. I think the important thing here is this is how we record for an organisation's carbon emissions. So while we keep that in our mind, this reporting is for what is done in our organisation and what we're trying to do ourselves to get that down for our organisation. But absolutely keeping watching the brief.
Great, and Councillor Crane was out with the Serco teams experiencing what it's like to be on the bin collection service last week. And actually, she did raise that question, Councillor Jeremy, around the 2 depots moving to a single site in relation to the carbon position. Actually, some of the guys and girls commented that actually they're not moving to Attleborough and Swatton and Swaffham, which they were. So I think it is a bit of a give and take across the piece. I think for our perspective, what we're now watching closely is the transfer station closures across the district now, and what that means for our business and how we can deliver an effective service. Obviously, we can't do anything around a single site depot, but I know that Councillor Crane is picking up with colleagues at County and with the officers around having those 2 transfer stations now, which is impacting us vastly. Outside, one inside the district and one outside the district, but really valid point. And I know about the leisure, I'm sure that Rihanna will pick up with our centre managers to ensure that they're following those standard operating procedures around pool covers. I had Councillor Khyber, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm intrigued as to how we're going to have zero CO2 for street lighting in the next year. And of course the carbon coming from use of electric vehicle charging points is moving us away from our target, and yet it's a good thing. So I'm not sure how we're going to manage that.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Khyber. Yes, obviously the more use of electric vehicle charging points is a good thing, but of course we're using electricity, which is then increasing the carbon emission. But that's possibly a good emission as opposed to a bad emission. Going back to the street lights, we now have all our street lights are under a green energy tariff. I think I'm correct in saying, am I not, Claire?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, so that's good news. So I mean, we'll always be using electricity on the lights, obviously, but it's all 100% green tariff now. Thank you.
Great, thanks ever so much. Are there any further questions in relation to this? If not, will Councillor Crane move those recommendations?
Thank you, Chair. Could I move the recommendation that Cabinet acknowledges the content of this report? Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. All those in favour? Lovely, thank you. That's unanimous. So move on to item 15, which is the Breckland Bridge business plan, and in the absence of Councillor Hewitt, I will present this item, and I'm grateful for colleagues from Bridge who are joining us today. So statement from Councillor Hewitt. Firstly, apologies for not being able to be with you at Cabinet today to present the report on Breckland Bridge. Despite not being with you, I'm keen that I make sure I'm able to highlight to you my views regarding the important activity area within the Council itself. I'd like to start by reminding members that understanding the property development activity is not without risk, and secondly, that understanding the development and construction activity is not the Council's core business. However, despite this Council is importantly steeped into the market with this very innovative joint venture, and I want to highlight 3 important aspects to this partnership. The first one is regarding addressing how the Council obtains the best return it can from its property and land assets across the district. This particular focus of the current business plan is the Council's land assets, which we need to continually work together on to make the assets work harder for all of us, therefore our residents and businesses. Accordingly, there is a commercial focus in Breckland's Bridge vision, as previously approved by members of this council, and this is important to ensure, like some of our other property-related activities, this remains our priority and aim. However, we recognise that the property and land of the council owns can assist those local communities with other uses, and therefore we do have the ability to be flexible in partnership and how we use these sites when they come forward for review. I would therefore urge all members to engage with the consultation on site as they come forward from the officers of the council to ensure that we're able to receive the views of the communities that you represent. It's vital we hear these views during these consultation phases to help inform the decisions that are made. The second area of input is around the joint venture and what it produces. Currently, the focus of this is on the availability of assets for residential housing delivery. Whilst we're not a large house builder in the area, through being a partner in the joint venture, we can lead on the good design and sustainability standards throughout these schemes. And we're able to ensure that participation within the market, so we're experiencing directly those challenges that other developers are, whilst dealing with our outlined in the report itself, but more importantly, underlining our aspirations. Lastly, I want to bring to the attention of how Breckland Bridge has recognised the importance of construction and development has on the environment and the company, and as an environmental policy as part of this business plan itself. Seeking to minimise the impact, comply fully with the legislation, continually trying to improve standards, consider sustainability in every aspect of our design throughout to completion, and importantly to protect the environment are all key elements of this policy. Another key aim in the policy is targeting homes built in Breckland Bridge to have that A EPC rating, and I'm pleased to see that this aspect, particularly in the work of this partnership, continuing. Overall and in summary, despite the difficulties of the market conditions, the partnership continues to deliver and create important outputs for our residents, whether directly or indirectly, and Councillor Hewitt urges all members of this Cabinet to support the approval of the business plan for this year to help enable the partnership to continue to add value to the work undertaken by this council. Thank you. And I will open up to questions and comments from colleagues, and officers stand by for your response. So I've got Councillor Attwell and Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to
Great, thanks. Ralph?
Thanks, Chairman. I did take a note of the questions. I think I can answer two of them, which is the first and the third one. The first one was about what can we do with our land in terms of sort of affordable housing. I think in answer to that, I would say that it's a bit of a mixed economy. Obviously, we've got land and property, as you say, Councillor, that we can use and direct to activities of the council. In this particular case, this is one vehicle that we use to obviously review our land and see whether we can provide alternative outputs from the land. And we do that in different ways. Obviously, we have used our land and property assets for social housing, particularly in places like Thetford, where we've built some new homes for rough sleepers and obviously the home house facility. And where possible, because this joint venture is commercially focused, then there has to always be a balance of outputs, whether that's financial return, affordable housing, sustainability and design, etc. So not unlike any other developer in the marketplace at the moment who are struggling with costs and sale prices, the same as any other developer, we're looking to balance that. The Breckland Bridge is looking to balance that to see where it can provide as much affordable housing as it possibly can. But it has to also wash its face, so to speak, and create a return for the council, a financial return for the council as well, like any other developer should do. The second question, I can answer is about the open space and the Swanton Morley sites. At the outset, when we procured the partner back in 2013-14, we, as part of the procurement, we had to make available all land and property that we thought could come forward in the period of the partnership, which is 20 years, for whatever purpose. And 20 years is a long time, and things can change in that time. And as you pointed out, Councillor Atwell, you know, there could be things happen in terms of development where there could be exchange of open space, additional open space, movement of open space, etc. Just because they're on the list, it doesn't mean that they're obviously available for development. It just means they're available to be reviewed at some point in the period of the partnership to give us that flexibility.
Thanks, Rod. And just to expand on that point, so from Councillor Hewitt's perspective, as the Cabinet member responsible for Bridge, his job is to get the best commercial return, and that's where he will start from his position. Councillor Bowes has already started going toe-to-toe with Councillor Hewitt by saying, actually, what are we doing to utilise our bits of land and our ownership, which won't impact a financial cost to the Breckland Bridge joint venture contract, but we're delivering those homes at pace. And that strategic housing solution policy, which we adopted earlier today, allows us now that flexibility to move with pace. And some of those won't always be those traditional block built buildings. Some of those may be TA, ISO type facilities. They may be modern method construct, whatever they may be, so that we can deliver those affordable homes, whether they are permanent or temporary, to reduce that much needed homelessness waiting list, and of course those on the wider housing register. So that work is still ongoing. I think the housing solution piece earlier is just part one of that. That now allows us the flexibilities in RP to work out what is going to be our medium and long-term solution for this district to deal with that within our own asset, how we can work with other developers to manage that, but how we can use our existing land assets, and in turn, if required, acquire other bits of land across the district, and therefore how could we maybe perversely use Bridge to deliver that for us, because that sits outside the contract for Bridge to build on property and assets not already owned by this district. So that work is in train, and as you heard from Councillor Jermyn and Councillor Clausen earlier, it's taken time for us to get to where we are today around the housing solution. I think this is now the next iteration, creating that bandwidth for the relevant cabinet members and under Max's stewardship to drive us forward to find that long-term solution for housing needs across this district. I will look to Ralph, but I think since the partnership since 2013, that's intact and that's already in place. So this is just a refresh and review of where we are across the delivery of all of the schemes within the phasing model. But I will look to Ralph just for clarification, because I can be wrong.
You're not wrong, Chair. Yeah, so this is just to, what you've got today is just the updated business plan that comes forward every year, but there's no change to the actual underlying contract, which is a shareholders agreement. I think it's important to remember it is a shareholders agreement. We are in a joint venture here, a true joint venture. This isn't a sort of an outsourced contract where we can actually dictate what our partner does. We work very closely with our partner, Land Group. We work very closely with them in partnership to make sure we get the right outputs for the council and our partner. So, and there is some flexibility in there. The underlying contract remains the same, the underlying vision remains the same, but we work very closely with them. So if there's some flexibility that needs to come forward because there's a certain priority need, then we can always look at that with the partnership.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a number of comments, some of which relate to the small sites disposal, which probably won't surprise you. So I'm going to be parochial in terms of Dereham and broad brush, and also political. As Councillor Atterbull has alluded to, it's quite a long list in terms of Dereham, in terms of obviously the 3 wards in Dereham. And the list is actually, excluding car parks, the list of land in there has actually expanded from the original list last October, which some of us actually didn't support, but we'll let that pass. Getting political, I'll pass over the fact that leaflets from the governing group in the last election talked about protecting green spaces, which was raised up with me by many residents. I don't know how this will play in Dereham. As you know, we do have a shortage of open green space, as how this help matters. I found, in terms of the small sites element of this, it rather opaque. I couldn't see any sort of link and tie up there with the local plan, and Councillor Atterbull's alluded to, you know, processes of registration, etc., and there's been the call for sites, and obviously each site will stand and fall on its own merits, but I couldn't see, and I think like any resident, I'd be worried about the fact there doesn't seem to be a timescale in there, the criteria of how things will be assessed of being, giving, say, community value, how suitability would be assessed, the value to the community, how things might be transferred. Will things be subject to the vagaries of, say, the planning process, the alertness of individual councillors, residents and parishes as things go along on a case by case, rather than say looking at a number of these and saying, look, as Councillor Attle mentioned, these aren't really going to be, built on at all. We've assessed these. We can actually do a transfer and look at a en-bloc discussion with some parishes and council where it's appropriate. Obviously, it's a trite comment to make. Land, they're not making it anymore, I gather. So that's going out of business. And we are obviously Breckland are the legal owner of the land, but you are custodians and guardians of future generations. Once we've built on it, and I accept there are very good purposes in a number of cases of building on and reducing our outgoings, improving housing, we aren't going to be able to do that again. So I'm not calling it a fire sale because it isn't damaged goods. So I'll be looking for much more collaboration, but also firming up how we're actually going to equate value with a better return as opposed to mindfulness, because I know a number of residents were extremely anxious about proposals when they came out in the press last time. This isn't to say that every single site has to be defended to the last ditch. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks. So I'll attempt to, and then I'll look to Ralph if he needs to interject that I've got anything wrong. So we look to dispose of around 10 sites per annum, but that in turn has got a baseline of about £150,000 per annum. Now that's linked to our budget, so some of those sites may flex, and it may be 4 sites if that residual disposal cost is higher than we may expect. I think from Councillor Hewitt's perspective is, and your comment around the long list, is actually for members of this council, and Councillor Hewitt after this, through the officers will email all members to actually sit down and have a look at what that piece of land is using our new data software on our website, where you can see geographically where that is, and actually have a bit of a conversation with your communities, whether they are parish and town councils or residents associations, about what may be the most suitable use for that. Twin tracking Councillor Attewell's really powerful observation that we need to deliver affordable homes across the whole of the district. In some of those locations, maybe 1 or 2 bungalows for that type of supported living, whatever it may be, across the locality. And being parochial, I know in my area I've got 3 sites up for disposal. I'm considering with my fellow councillor and the parish council, how can we deliver those open space provisions, but also deal with that wider housing challenge, and there's an opportunity to put something on that. Question mark, don't know yet, but we're starting those conversations really early. So I know from your perspective, you've championed and fought hard around certain pieces of Breckland-owned land and safeguarding that for green open space, but actually where can we get a clear understanding and reassure you as an elected representative, but also reassure your community whether that is going to be safeguarded, who the ownership of that's going to be, whether that is the district council and it continues, or whether that transfers to a residents association or private ownership in perpetuity, whatever it may be. We've got to work through that. But to reassure you early on, this is not us going through all of those sites in a single calendar year and disposing of them all. It will be a slow process, and as Councillor Hewitt said in his opening statement, it is a consultation with you as ward members, being that voice for the communities, finding the best type and outcome for that piece of land, reflected on the council's requirements from a revenue position, but also some of those council challenges around our wider housing need, and then linking in, of course, as you alluded to, what are those green open spaces which we've locked in to our local plan, recently undertaken some 14 months ago, and of course to our wider position that once it's built on or disposed of, we can't get it back. So lots of different levers we've got to get right there, Harry, and I implore all of us to make sure that we're engaging early on through that list, so that nobody's feeling rushed, nobody's feeling bounced, and actually working through it in complete partnership. But I'll look to Councillor, Freudian slip. I'll look to Ralph if there's anything I may have missed.
I didn't think I'd become a councillor that quickly. The only thing I would add is, in the past year since we took the business plan through last time, There has been some adaptation to the approach, consulting with the ward members and the parish councils, town councils at an earlier stage, really to get that collaboration. And in that period of time, we have done some community asset transfers, we have held some assets, and we have disposed of some assets. So it has been a real mixed outcome according to what the responses we've had through the consultation. So just to reiterate that point, it's really key to the assessment.
Lovely, thank you for that reassurance there.
Just to come back briefly, thank you for that, Ralph Burton, not Councillor Burton. Yes, I hope that residents find some reassurance. The hundreds of residents who've contacted me about this. As you say, it does depend very much on the capabilities of town and parish councils and their officers and members to engage with residents and put cases forward. My concern is about the sort of the variability of that and how people may do things on a timely basis, so there's actually a proper level playing field, regardless of resources of those particular councils in examining fairly those decisions. So I think we'll have to watch this space. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson, please. Thank you for that comment. If there are no other comments at all, I'll move the recommendations on behalf of Cabinet. All those in favour? Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 16, which is Thetford 3G, and ask Councillor Webb to present, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay. This report seeks to release capital funding of 109k towards the conversion of an existing multi-use game pitch at the Leisure Centre in Thetford to a 3G football pitch. The capital investment will allow us to match fund against funds released from the leisure operator and enable us to submit a funding application to the Football Foundation later this year. This is the second time this project has come forward following an approach from the Football Foundation, who have identified the site as a key strategic location for the provision of a 3G pitch. The report sets out the commercial business case for this decision. The feasibility work has identified it as an opportunity to increase revenue of the pitch, which will reduce the ongoing liability associated with the current pitch, which is currently underutilised. Officers have engaged heavily with England Hockey and the local hockey clubs to provide advice and support about a potential move from their existing location, and a feasibility report has been commissioned which identified an opportunity for provision of an all-weather hockey pitch in an alternative location in a town. Whilst this opportunity is still in the development stages, key partners are engaged and actively moving the project forward. Officers have briefed local ward members and met again with the hockey club prior to today's meeting. Not only will the delivery of this project assist us in mitigating long-term of income from the existing pitch, it will also be used short-term to help negotiate an improved benchmark position in the current benchmarking process, which is underway and will impact on the council's budget in 2024. Right, so my recommendation is that the Cabinet recommend full council agree release of funds up to 109,000 from the Inclusive Growth Reserve and the Growth and Investment Reserve for the redevelopment of the multi-used games area, Mugger, sites at Breckland Leisure Centre and Waterworld, Thetford, with a third-generation 3G artificial grass pitch, AGP, being installed as replacement. Recommendation 2, that Cabinet recommend to full council to accept all grant funding following Football Foundation application, circa 487,000, and contribution from the leisure operator, circa 100,000, and set up necessary budgets to spend. Recommendation 3, that Cabinet recommend to full Council to delegate authority to accept the terms and conditions of the football funding grant to the Executive Member for Leisure in consultation with the Assistant Director Contract and Operations. And the last one, recommendation 4, that delegation is given to the Assistant Director Contracts and Operations and the Council Solicitor in consultation with the Executive Member for Property, Project and Procurement to carry out negotiations with Parkwood Leisure and associated companies to obtain the best benchmarking outcome for the Council. Thank you very much.
Good, lovely, thank you very much. Councillor Webb, any questions or comments? Councillor Jermy, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Alison, for the introduction. May I also thank the officers who gave a full briefing to Thetford members last week, which was very well received. This is very exciting news and very much welcomed. Something I've learned over the last well, it's about a year now since we started having these conversations. This is good news for Thetford, but also the surrounding areas, because there's a significant number of people that look to Thetford for leisure facilities from surrounding villages to Thetford. So this has, quite wide-ranging implications. It's a good example of a partnership between Breckland, private sector, in this case Parkwood, but also a strategic funder and significant sums of money, which is to be encouraged. I will just make a comment about hockey. So one of our key points as Thetford members is, yes, of course we should be supporting and improving football provision, but we can't, as a result of that, see an end of other sports. All sports are important, including those that are not always on the TV or receiving the big bucks. Sport should be for all, and hockey is just as important, or more if you're a hockey player, to you. So we didn't want for this proposal to effectively see the end of hockey being played in Thetford. The wording of the report has significantly improved since the first time it came out, and there is a commitment I can see from the council to supporting hockey moving forward, and I think that's really good news. So I will be very happy to support this when it gets to full council. I would urge the Cabinet to continue to support hockey and to monitor that progress as time progresses. If we can get it so that everything lines up so that hockey have somewhere to play at the same time as football progresses, great, because we should be encouraging all sports. But very happy to support this when it comes to full council, and it's good news.
Lovely, thank you, Councillor Jermy. Any other questions or comments in relation to this? No. Do you want to move the recommendations, please, Councillor Webb?
Move the recommendations, please.
Lovely, thank you. All those in favour? Lovely, thank you, that's unanimous. Item 17, just to confirm, this isn't a standard item, it's a clerical error, but as it's in the report, I will receive it. There are no recommendations from the Scrutiny Commission to me to look at. Thank you very much, Councillor Jermy. Item 18, the Anglia Revenues and Benefits Partnership, to note the minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of June 2023. Is there anything important you want to highlight, Councillor Cowan?
Yes, there is, actually. It's obviously a new committee. We've had May elections, so there are new members on the joint committee, and we had our first meeting, as you can see here. There is a trend which we will be monitoring very closely, and that is as a result of the economic situation. And you will see that there is a slight fall-off in council tax and NDR collection, largely, I have to say, as a result of an appeal for East Suffolk, which saw them having to repay significant sums. And in terms of Breckland's performance, slight reduction through the CARF payments, and also the fact that a number of people have not prepaid their council tax for the forthcoming year. It's a very minor issue, that one, but we will be keeping a close eye on that. But the good news is that Anglia Revenues is performing very well indeed. It's providing services in particular in relation to fraud compliance to other authorities, and we're recovering significant sums of money, particularly those related to single-person discount frauds. Thank you, Chairman.
Lovely, thank you. Any questions or comments from colleagues to Councillor Cowan as our representative on the ARP partnership? No. So item 19 then, which is date of the next meeting. The meeting will be held on Monday, the 11th of September 2023 at 9:30 here in the Anglia room. And that now formally closes the business of Cabinet. Thank you very much, everyone.